Okay, so yes, so Aaron says yes on waiting to share input altogether when evaluating. Yep, you don't want anybody yelling, I hate that. Even better to write it down so people don't change their stories. Exactly, because once they hear the I hate that, they might change their story. Yeah, that's a really good point. So Aaron's commenting on how also part of the sensory evaluation as a team is establishing the vocabulary. And I think that's something that, as you all know, the chocolate industry doesn't really have. I mean, and this is where, as president of the board of the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, we're doing our 5-year strategic plan right now. And I look at the Specialty Coffee Association, they've got one flavor wheel. They all came together on that. Although I was talking to somebody in the specialty coffee industry who said to me, yeah, and it took us 25 years to come to that. So I would say chocolate, we're not there. I know there's groups working on standardization, but certainly standardized vocabulary is challenging. And I will tell you a story that I'm going to not tell you who it is, but I do know that there is a chocolatier who works with Valrhona. For the large chocolatiers, Valrhona will create their own blend from the bean. And so this person who actually was a roaster for Scharfenberger knew exactly what they wanted from the roast profile for Valrhona. They're not with Scharfenberger now, but they were at some point. But the problem was they didn't have the same vocabulary. And so they actually had to go over to France for 2 weeks and do a crash course in Valrhona sensory so that they could have the same vocabulary so that when they said, this is what I want, Valrhona knew what they meant, right? So I think, Aaron, your point about establishing that vocabulary, because my cherry could be somebody else's raspberry or strawberry, right? So that is I think one of the most challenging parts of chocolate, is because even if you establish a sensory vocabulary with your team, it might be different than somebody else in the industry. But you're right, that's a really good point. So then let's see, question: after 14 years with the chocolate industry, how'd you qualify Chocolopolis? I'm not sure what you mean by that. After 14 years in the chocolate industry, how'd you qualify? Maybe, and this is someone, I don't know whose name this is, but if you could ask me that again, maybe I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Lauren, I think they're asking maybe how do you classify? Because the follow-up, it says, is it a chocolate business or agro-industrial business? So they're trying to ask what kind of business is Chocolopolis.
Oh, it was sorry. It was we were a retailer. We made bonbons as a chocolatier, but we did not make chocolate from the bean. We brought in chocolate from the bean from lots of makers like all of you, and as I said, told the story and shared it with customers. So it was a retail store here in Seattle. It's a physical retail store. We had, lots of selection of bean to bar chocolate. We actually had an entire counter full of bonbons. Some of them came from chocolatiers like Christopher Elbow, and then others we made ourselves. We started making more and more ourselves. And then you could order from a menu of drinking chocolate by the cup. And so you could order Madagascar, you could order Colombia, you could order, specific areas of Venezuela or Ecuador for your drink. You could also get, spicy drinking chocolate or peanut butter drinking chocolate. So as I said, we were trying to do an awful lot of things. I hope that answers your question. Is that kind of, do you think, Andal?
I don't know. There's from Zoom user. I was
I
just
know.
I don't know who it is. It doesn't have their name. But my question to you, Lauren, is, you were talking about curating and organizing everything. But if you look at the people, most of the people are starting the chocolate business. They are not the resellers of the other people's chocolate. They are selling their own chocolate. If that's the case, how would they go about, deciding what flavors work, or do they go with what is very, like a lot of people like, do you go for that flavor, or you create your own flavor, unique flavor to differentiate yourself? So what kind of tips you can give for the people who are just starting, or
Yep.
they just have few bars? So how would they like to scale up their
Yeah.
business?
No, that's a great question. I think I would say you need to do a little of both, because I think one of the things we have not done well as an industry in the past is meeting customers where they are. And I think people are getting better at that. But if you want to hook customers and get them into craft chocolate, you've got to provide them with something that is familiar to them. So I think if you're thinking about inclusion bars, it's doing something like salt and almond. I mean, I'm not a huge salt and almond, but I think that is the #1 dark chocolate with salt and almond is the #1 seller. And I heard Brad from Cho say, yeah, you kind of have to have that one. So I'm not saying you should go off and do that, but I'm using that as an example. Like, find something that's approachable, that customers know, that they're familiar with, and then just do it in your way that's even better and get them in. And then you can focus on trying to move them to some of your other products. And then I think to Andal's point, as a retailer, like for me, and granted, I'm not your average specialty food retailer that might have a small chocolate section, right? So they're probably going to want more of the almond and sea salt and maybe one unique flavor. For me, I was looking for unique flavors, but they have to work, right? So I would say if you're in a country of origin, pick ingredients that are unique to your origin, but not so unique that the American consumer or the European consumer, whoever you're selling to, is not familiar with them at all. Like if you're in Nicaragua, and I'm thinking of you, Sally, cashews, bananas, things like that. Yeah, I want to see a passion fruit. I want to see that in chocolate. And maybe there's a unique local ingredient. And in fact, Andal and I were just talking about moringa before we got on, and I've had a white chocolate bar that 57 Chocolate makes with moringa. And, I'm not familiar with moringa, and it's interesting to me, but I didn't grow up with that. And so I'm like, well, it's interesting. I enjoyed trying it. Is it a bar I'd buy or eat every day? No. So I think it's if you're dealing with ingredients I'm not as familiar, you have to be aware that there might be a certain consumer base for that, but it's probably not going to be as large. So it is finding that kind of balance between unique local ingredients and what's so not so unique that people are willing to try it. But I love complexity too. And, I love spices. So for me, interesting spice combinations from your region, or those are interesting as well.
Well, Lauren, and I want to make sure some people just typing in. I'm trying to see if they would like to ask the question so that we can open up their mic. So like the Zoom user, he said his name is Rob.
Yep.
So I want to see if Rob can ask the question.
Okay. And I was just going to say to Jeremy, I'm thinking about it. I'm sure I wouldn't say backfired. It's just like how many people showed up. And I think that's where I get back to the complexity. I was trying to do way too many things, and all these events are time consuming, as I think Andal knows, to plan and execute. And when you're trying to do too many of them or do things all the time with all these programs, it's time consuming, and you don't always get some of them. You get tons of people, others you don't. So that's why I would say I wouldn't say anything backfired. Like I can't think of anything. If I do, I'll let you know. But I would just say focus.
Yeah, if anybody wants to ask questions, please raise your hand. We can open your mic.
Okay, I see Rob is asking. Okay, and again, I closed the store in July of 2020, so like the store is no more. I'm doing all online bean to bar tastings now with a very small curated collection. But at the time, yeah, so inventory management, we were really careful, and so we kept a very, very tight inventory. So we didn't keep a lot of inventory of bars on hand, and we made sure that anything we ordered had at least 6 months, if not more, on it. So that was one of the trade-offs. I'm not buying pallets of these bars and storing them somewhere because we had a lot of inventory and I wanted to turn it. And if something passed its code date, we would pull it off the shelf, which is not true for some of I will call them competitors, even in Seattle. I actually had a customer say to me, oh yeah, I went to this other store and they've got a good selection, but he's like, but you got to look at the code dates because some of that stuff's really old. And the other thing was they didn't have air conditioning. Okay, so we did, and the bonbons were 4 weeks, and so that was a lot of work. We had a whole system for how we managed everything and kept the bonbons no more than 4 weeks, and we pulled bars that were past their code date, but again, we didn't go deep on inventory. And so I probably could have gotten, somewhat better pricing if we'd gone deeper on inventory, but that's also a huge cash sink because then you got to put all this cash in up front. You don't know what's going to happen. You got to store the inventory. So running it tight was a benefit from many perspectives. But again, we weren't a maker, so it wasn't like I had to go make, 10,000 bars in advance.
And also, can you talk a little bit about your curation process in the sense how it applies to the chocolate makers, like what you're looking for when you're curating? Are you looking for the texture, flavor, or origin? So if that will give some guidelines for people who want to enter into US market, what to look for.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So for me it was two things, and I think it was, did it have flavor complexity? And when the panel was tasting, I said they'd put their pencils down, then we'd have a conversation. We accepted, like, it was interesting to hear what they would say. And I think the more we did this as a group, the pickier people got. And it got to the point where we were accepting like 3% of the bars we tasted. I mean, because we weren't getting a lot of complexity of flavor, which we wanted. I can't tell you, like between 2010 and 2014, I think, which is when the craft market, we started to see all of these new makers. I don't think all of them had their processes down. And I can't tell you how many acidic bars I tasted. And I think it's because if you look at almost everybody's story, it's certainly my story, it was what got you into craft chocolate. Well, I tasted a bar of chocolate made with cacao from Madagascar, right? So like these strong cherry notes. And we went through a period where people were just not roasting the stuff right. And I'm not a chocolate maker. I don't know what they were doing, but I think they were under roasting, and we were getting such acidic bars. And I was like, if I taste another acidic bar, I don't know what I'm going to do. So there was a period where we just didn't take much of anything, way too acidic. So I think it's getting your roast profile down, giving us complexity, giving us something interesting that doesn't taste like every other bar. And then the texture, like I don't want gritty or chalky texture. It needs to be creamy and smooth. It needs to have a nice melt. So for me, those are kind of like the keys. You got to have that. If it's an inclusion, like I was saying before, it needs to work. You can put all the coolest ingredients together in a bar and it can sound great, but it doesn't always work. And then how are you thinking about the flavor profile of the chocolate you're putting with those ingredients, right? It's got the flavor profile of that origin or that blend or whatever you're doing has to work. And let me say something about blends. We had a blend section. It got smaller and smaller because there were chocolate makers doing blends. And actually Soma in Canada does a really good job with blends. They had some of my favorite blend bars, but I can't tell you how often I would taste a blend and be like, I think the chocolate maker is using this as their trash can. They have a bunch of beans they don't know what to do with, so they're just going to blend them and then try and sell them to me. Like, don't do that. As one chocolate maker said, when I get bad beans, I make brownies. Like, go make brownies. Don't make a bar and send it to someone like me. Okay, and I see Erin has their hand up.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. I'm actually here in Seattle.
Oh, nice. Okay, are you a chocolate maker or what's your?
I am an aspiring drinking chocolate maker.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm a food technologist.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, did you have a broker to help source more widely, or did you do all the research by yourself to get?
Well, so brokers, yeah, okay. So brokers work for the person selling, but then they do the selling. So they would come in and pitch me, and I know, the brokers and I have tight relationships because we all know each other. And one of them actually represented our Bonbon line that we sold to PCC, which you'll know here. So we did have a broker who represented our own confections, but I didn't, for me, working with the brokers was not a good, wasn't bad, but I'm just saying I was trying to find unique stuff. And yes, there's certain distributors I would buy from because that was the only way I could get things. But I also really liked working directly with chocolate makers that we found and could create more of a unique curated collection. Like I didn't want the same bars that every store down the street had, which it got to the point where craft chocolate, is now ubiquitous enough that a lot of stores do have overlap with bars. There's enough craft bars out there, depending on how you're defining craft. And so for me, it was really important not to buy through the brokers. I mean, I bought some stuff through them because I kind of had to, but I tried to buy as little as possible through them. But I would say that's probably the exception, not the rule, because that's also, it's more of an inventory management. You spend more time managing inventory and curating. And so if that's what your goal is, great. But if you're trying to run a specialty food store and have a nice little selection of chocolate, maybe you do want to work with the broker who knows what your kind of approach is and recommend some bars from their catalog. So yeah, for me, it wasn't important, but for others, it may make sense.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And let's see, Rob from Boston is saying, I work mainly with Criollo from Peru, Haiti, and the cocoa nibs from there. You don't tell anything. Why do you? I'm curious. If Rob's willing to turn on his microphone, I'm curious why you do not tell your customers anything about the origin of your beans, because those are some really nice origins. Or if you want to type it. Oh, there we go. Rob's coming on. Okay. Or everybody's coming on. And if anybody's talking, your microphones are on. We can't hear you right now.
I want to just interrupt really quickly and say, for those of you that haven't been with us before, if you would like to be promoted to come in and speak live, there is a raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom panel. If you hover over the toolbar, it's about 2/3 of the way down on the right, raise hand, and then that way we know that you're willing to come forward and we'll open your mic for you.
Okay, so I think Rob is up, and I want to hear if he's willing to share why he doesn't tell customers about anything about the origin of the beans. Oh, you're at work. Okay, so you can't talk right now. Got it. Any other questions? I see we have Wynette up here, but Wynette is muted right now.
Mrs. Butler, you're muted.
I'm just trying to see if anyone else has any questions. Okay, Donna raised her hand. 1 second. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep. Hi, Donna.
Okay, hi. So I'm new to opening up a store. I've been doing chocolate, but I'm new.
Okay.
What would your suggestion be as to how many bars to carry from different regions?
Okay, so you said you're making chocolate, and so is this your chocolate, or are you bringing in other people's chocolate?
No, this will be my chocolate.
So I think going back to what I was saying at the beginning, you
Yeah,
know.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning part. I couldn't
Okay,
get
good.
it.
So no, so for you, it's not repetition. This is good to know. I would say that I've seen too many small batch chocolate makers try to do too many origins and not do any of them well. So I would say start with a smaller number of origins and do them very well and repeat them consistently, in the sense that keep buying the beans from that origin, because over time, you're going to know how to work with those beans. You're going to create better and better chocolate. And so I would go fewer origins and just really nail what you're doing and do it well. And then, you can always add origins later after you've got some momentum, but that would be my suggestion. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Andal, you're on mute.
I'm just unmuting. Yeah, my question is, like, if somebody wants to sell it here, what are the licenses or permits or registrations? And who does it? Like as a seller, Chocolate Police does it, or as a buyer, Chocolate Police does it, or the seller has to do this?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So again, we were doing lots of things. So one, as somebody reselling food in the US, you had to register with the FDA. But then when we started making bonbons in the kitchen and wholesaling them and selling them across state lines, then we had to register with the USDA, and we had to get the commercial kitchen license. So like we always had one with our county because we were making drinking chocolate and stuff for the store. But once we started selling wholesale and across state lines of the bonbons, then we had to register with the USDA, which we did through our own State Department of Agriculture. So we signed up with the Washington State Department of Agriculture because we are in Washington State. We filled out their application, and it required a lot of information and a hazmat, a safety plan, all these things. We submitted that, and then they alert the USDA. And so most of the time we would get a Washington State Department of Agriculture inspector come and inspect us. But one time the same inspector had been contracted by the USDA to come do a USDA inspection. And he stood and watched our chocolatiers for 2 hours and asked a lot of questions. And he clearly must be the guy who knows enough about chocolate that they send him out, because he knew what questions to ask, and he at least understood enough about the equipment and everything else that he knew what he was doing. So that was the one time we actually had a USDA inspection. And the challenge is, I would say the majority of recalls I saw, not for us, but like other products we were selling, the majority of recalls for the USDA and the FDA, depending on who's doing what, it's a little confusing about which organization is doing what. But the biggest number of recalls is around product labeling and allergens. So part of the process when they first approve you as a kitchen is you have to print out all your labels, and you have to have all the allergens. They read the labels and they want to know that all the allergens are listed properly. And at one point we had listed may contain, I'm going to get this wrong. I think it said may contain milk, and they were like, no, it has to say may contain dairy, or it might have been the other way around, but they're very, very specific, particularly around allergens. And so labeling is a huge part of it. So make sure you have a good labeling machine. Make sure, like we bought one, everything we did when it came to printing price signs, when it came to printing the ingredient labels for the backs of our bars, we bought printers because it was like, I want to be able to change this stuff on the fly. I don't want to go print millions of these and then have to change them if something goes wrong. So for us, it was really easy to buy a Zebra printer and get just the stock labels and then sit there and print the ingredients on them so that we could change them anytime.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Gives you
I have-
flexibility.
Yes, thank you. I have a question. So you talked about sort of laying the foundation or the bones of getting started, building a customer community, like training your employees to have the right type of language and thinking about what product you want to put out there. So if I'm a chocolate maker and I haven't reached the point of having a retail store, what would be the first thing that I would think about if I want to work on building customer one as a part of my community? What would be the one thing I could do?
Get out there, like to farmers markets and pop-up stops, and don't rely on your friends, family, and coworkers to tell you you're making great chocolate. I can't tell you how many chocolate makers I would get coming in. Oh, I've been making chocolate, and my friends and family say it's the best chocolate they've ever had. And I go back to the story I was telling everybody at the beginning, where a customer would be standing in front of the chocolate maker, and of course it was the best chocolate they ever had because they're having this wonderful experience. But then they come back to me and say, oh, but I'd never buy it again. Your friends and family love it because you made it for them. It's made with love, and it's chocolate. But that doesn't mean it's really great. So you need to go to you need to, like, farmers markets, have a booth at a farmers market, do a pop-up inside another store. If there, I know in Seattle, there's lots of small retailers that will do pop-ups with other people, and try to get more, I would say, unbiased feedback and start to get your name out there. And that's how you build the community. But you've got chocolate, so you've physically got to get in front of people and get it in their mouths and let them meet you and hear your story. I mean, that's really, and you also might get good feedback for things you might want to change as you go forward, or ideas for new bars. So but I think starting small like that, meaning you don't have a lot of fixed costs, go out to these farmers markets and try to create pop-ups with other retailers in your area. Those are going to be the least expensive way to get feedback, get it quickly, and start to build that community. And once you get a mailing list, then you can start to think of other ways. How could I have events or do something? And some of those are going to be physical, again, because you've got chocolate, so you want to physically get it in their mouths. So this can't, I do online because I've got a community, right? And I've got people, doing 60 and 70 person corporate events, so I can ship the chocolate out and we do it. But I already have the community. If you don't have the community, you physically have to get together with them.
Can you talk a little bit about, as I think for our international participants, I think pop-up might be sort of an American thing. So can you explain exactly what that is, so people will understand? Because I think that's a really good avenue, because you don't have to have your own, brick and mortar store.
Yeah, so the idea of a pop-up is where you go to another retailer who has a store, and you do a little store within a store for maybe a day or two, or maybe a week, and they promote it to their customers. So, who's going to do that with you? It's someone who wants to have a little chocolate pop-up in their retail store, because it might get their customers to come in more frequently too, because they're like, oh, there's this chocolate thing, I'm going to go in there. So it's finding a business that is open to doing it, and sees the benefit. It's obviously probably not a chocolate store because they're already selling chocolate. But maybe it's a specialty food store, maybe it's a clothing boutique. I mean, I've seen all kinds of retailers who have a physical location be willing to try these pop-ups. And chocolate, I will say, I got into this business thinking, oh, the stereotype of women in chocolate, that's a stereotype. And I don't know, but then I opened the store, and I think, I don't know, I'm not a scientist. I'm just going to say that women are there are women who are just like, just so, and I don't think I'm one of them. I mean, I love my chocolate, but like, chocolate is everything. And I've certainly had plenty of men come in, and they will often love the connoisseur aspect. And again, I'm making gross generalizations here, but I think my point being is you could do a clothing boutique like for women, and you would probably get a huge turnout. So, and I do think that if you look at most market research, women tend, like the percentages are, women tend to like gravitate to the dark chocolate. So it is a very good customer base. There's plenty of men who love it too, but I'm just saying, if you want to do a nice clothing boutique, women's clothing boutique, you'd probably get a really good response. So I would say, like a store within a store, that is the idea of a pop-up.
Mrs. Butler, you're muted. Thank you, Lauren, for that. That's makes it a little more clear.
Okay, and then I'm just looking at this.
Yeah, Rob has a question. So.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for people?
Yeah, Rob has a question for you. He's saying, he's letting the customers enjoy that. One second, let me read it word by
I
word.
think it's more of a statement than a question.
No,
What he wants to know is why should he let people know the origin?
Why
Why should I
not?
let them know where the beans are? That's my question. As
Why
a
not? Why
connoisseur
aren't you
of
going to
chocolate-
tell them? What do you gain by not telling them? I mean, you just said you're using the Criollo, right? So you're using these amazing beans, but you're not going to tell them about it. And they're going to think it's like a Hershey bar if you're not telling them about it. So like, I'm not clear why you wouldn't want to tell them. I don't know. I don't know who your customer base is. I don't know, how you're selling the bars, but if your customer base likes food and is interested and you're going to ask them to, assuming you're asking them to pay $8, $10, $12 a bar, you got to have a story to go with that $8, $10, $12, right? It's not a Hershey bar. So, and you're using Criollo, so you've got a story. So I guess that's why I would just say, why not tell them?
Yeah, the other question is, you said, you're not using the, the brokers all the time. You try to find your own bars. So somebody from the other countries, if they want to reach the US market, how do they know which companies are buying, or how do they contact? Because you have to look at the shipping is so expensive for them. Let's say they have to send 5 bars to you and 5 bars to somebody in Boston or somebody like that. How do they manage it? Because then their initial cost is high, not knowing whether it will be approved, whether they will be buying more. How can the customers, how can they handle it, the chocolate makers in other countries?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't really have a good answer for that other than to say most of the stuff I was getting through distributors was not in the country. It was makers from outside of the country. There were a few I would buy directly from, but I'm not buying huge quantities and I'm paying shipping, right? So I'm paying the DHL. In fact, at one point when Cacao Hunters, before they were distributed in the US, we did one order for them and I was DHLing it from Colombia, but the price was such that it wasn't going to be a problem. Like I knew I could mark it up enough that I wasn't going to have a problem. And I wanted that unique selection and it was really good. And it was funny because they said to me, yeah, a motorcycle driver for DHL showed up. So we told them, and on a Friday, which you never ship on a Friday in the heat. So we told them to send a truck back on Monday. So I was like, okay, so like they sent the DHL truck back on Monday and picked it up and brought it to me. So I would do occasionally, I would do Soma because that was the only way I could get Soma across, it was Canada, across the border. I did Cacao Hunters until they were distributed in the US. And then I did do some others from Canada and Australia for a time before they had distribution in the US. But you're right. If you're, for me, when into 2010, which I use as the demarcation point, because that was when you start to see more craft chocolate makers, there weren't that many, right? So they were all, and they all knew Chocolopolis. So we would get tons of samples. But now there's so many that, you could probably create a retail store like Chocolopolis that was all US craft chocolate makers with nobody imported because there's so many to choose from. That wouldn't be very fun. But you're right, Andal. There's no good way around that. Unfortunately, not only is shipping expensive, but we're all selling a product that's perishable in heat. So it's just really hard to ship samples around the world. And it just is.
Sally,
go
Sally
ahead.
has a great question.
Yep. Yeah.
What would be if I only could afford to go to one chocolate festival or show, what one would give me the greatest value? What one would be the one I should go to?
I would say I'll give you 3 options, and I can tell you a little bit about them. Well, the Northwest Chocolate Festival here in Seattle, and I don't say that just because I'm in Seattle, it really gets lots of international chocolate makers. And Sally, I know you guys have been here to this one, so but it's been going on since 2007. So it's been around for a long time, and and the other thing I would say about the Seattle Pacific Northwest market and customers in general, which is one thing I loved about having a retail store here, is nobody just wants to eat their food. They all want to learn about it. So they're not going to just, at a festival like that, you're going to get some people coming in and grabbing samples, but the majority of people are going to stop, want to talk to you and learn about your product and then try it. So it's this amazing place where all these people really want to try chocolate. And because the festival and because of Chocolopolis and some other things here, it's a community that is very big when it comes to craft chocolate. The other ones I would say would be, I have not been to Chocoa in Amsterdam, but that's the other big one. So I would say those are the two like big festivals, big meaning like where you're really going to hit your artisan crowd that gets craft chocolate. And they're both consumer and industry. They have topics for both. I think Chocoa may have more industry stuff as well, but they're also, I think they're consumer as well, right, guys? I actually haven't been to Chocoa, but I think if you're going to go to yes, Andal?
I would add, the France, if people can afford the Zalando chocolate, because that's the reason is, even if they don't have a booth, they should just go there, because about 50,000 people come there over the 5-day period. Because they're in France, and also they get to taste all the other chocolate makers, so they can compare it, and then at least they will understand what chocolate is expected from other people when it comes to fine chocolate. Yes, they have some kind of mass market chocolate also, but the craft chocolate segment is growing in Sarando chocolate. So that's another one that I will add. If people who can afford to go there, of course,
Right.
small chocolate makers, the travel may be a problem.
Mrs. Balu, will you move a little closer to the mic? They said they can't hear you.
And I
So
was,
you were talking about Zalando chocolate.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, I will repeat it. Yeah, I was talking about Zalando chocolate as the third one because it's the biggest chocolate festival. About 50,000 people come for it to taste the chocolates. And even if you cannot afford to have a booth, but you should just at least walk the aisles and taste other people's chocolate, so you can understand what is expected from other people in when you want to export to Europe or US or West. You will understand a little bit, because a lot of the farmers, when we go, they are asking, I can make chocolate, but you know chocolate is still a luxury item. If I have to spend that money, I would rather spend on the food than as a chocolate. And my neighbor is the same. So where do I sell? That's why we thought having the conversation like this will help them. So there is an avenue outside. But only thing is, as a individuals, it's hard for them to ship each one. But what the Cross Atlantic Chocolate Collective, they did a good job of coming up with a group of chocolate makers from different countries, and then they send the bulk chocolate to us, and somebody melts the chocolate and tempers it and packages and ships within us, so that saves a lot of shipping costs. So all of you, that's why we encourage you to network with each other, so you can come up with your own collective, your own networking group, and you can sell each other's chocolate in different countries to get more exposure and get more money for your chocolate.
And can I just add to two things one thing you said there is, I think that is a really important point Andal made also about, you've got to, if you're a chocolate maker, taste a lot of other people's chocolate. And the French, I think, do a really good job with dark chocolate in general. I'm not saying every French maker does, but I think if you're just eating your own chocolate or chocolate that's very similar to yours, you're not going to really know the range of what's out there. So make sure you're trying lots of chocolate from lots of makers, even ones you might think are too big or whatever. Just keep an open mind and try lots of things, because you don't know, your palate's only going to be stronger for having tried a lot and really developing what you like and don't like. And just one more comment back on the festival question. The other festival that I think is very well done, but is not that big, is Dallas. Sandra Wolf for the Dallas Chocolate Festival does a good job of setting up programming, I think, for it. It's just not a very big market. So if you are in that region, though, and you're looking for something and it's less expensive for you to get there, that's a good one to consider, because he does do a very good job with education in the event.
I just want to quickly encourage everyone, if you want to create that community like Mrs. Balu was talking about, feel free to put your email in the chat and then copy it out so that you can contact one another.
Okay, anything else? I feel like I should start tap dancing.
So I'm thinking about if I were going to go to one of the shows and whether have a booth or not, I'm thinking about, you're going to be in front of a lot of people. What what, and maybe you can't make 500 bars because you might conceivably talk to 500 people. What do you want them to leave with? Is it a business card? Is it a pen, or, you know,
No.
because they have to be able to find you.
Yeah, so you want that. So I will tell you that the Northwest Chocolate Festival, while it was great for my business and that it brought lots of people to town, it was terrible for my business. And all my regulars would go up to the Northwest Chocolate Festival where there were booths from chocolate makers from all over the world, and they would go buy stacks of bars from the ones they liked. And so they would then have bars for months. Like my bar sales, luckily it was right into Christmas, so everything else would go up, but the bar sales would go down for a while. You want them to leave with your bars. And there are makers who sell out at the Northwest Chocolate Festival who make money coming because they sell so many bars. Now, I know not everybody may be able to make that many, but that's where you also have to decide, do you want to exhibit or do you just want to attend? Because if you're going to exhibit at that one, it's expensive to exhibit, but in all honesty, you want to sell the bars you want. I mean, walking away with a business card doesn't help if they don't remember your chocolate. You want them to walk away having bought a bar, they're going to try it again later and they're going to love it. And then they're going to find you because they want your chocolate. So you've got to be able to produce enough to make something like that worthwhile to come sell at.
The notes that I made, I always try to make, take notes and see what some of the takeaways are. And something you said, and I don't remember, I apologize what it was, but I wrote down, don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think that might be important in building a community. We talked about, partnering with other retailers, other people, for pop-ups and things like that. Are there other avenues of asking for help, other ways that, when you're building the community, other ways that you can, who else can you reach out to, or how else can you, ask for help?
No, it's a good question. I mean, I think the craft chocolate community is reasonably collaborative, at least in the US, which is always, I came from the business world before this, where everybody kind of like kept their stuff to themselves. And I've learned to collaborate in a great way. And I think actually it makes it a stronger business, because at the end of the day, you bring your unique experience to the business and nobody else can recreate that, right? So if you're doing your job the way you should be and creating your community the way you should be, nobody else is going to do exactly the same thing. So the more you can collaborate, the stronger we are as a community. I'm going to put in a plug for the FCIA here. If you're not a member of the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, please consider membership. We have a really wonderful new executive director, Effie Maglaris, and one of her goals is also to start doing a stronger job. We have a member directory. If you're a member, you can get on there. Like if you need machines, you call on Doll, but if you need, packaging, other equipment, there's all kinds of members there. And Effie is going to work on trying to create a stronger member service directory so you can connect with other people. In the past, we have had mentors. I don't think that's formally happening right now because it wasn't being used all that much, but I do think joining something like the FCIA, where you can reach out and ask for, like, I really need help with X, someone like Effie is going to help connect you to somebody who's a member who can help you with that, whatever that is. So it is engaging in the community. If you're just out there by yourself, it's hard to get that help, but you've got to be willing to engage in the community and you have to be willing to give back to the community. If you're going to get something from the community, you have to give back as well.
Yeah, one more thing on FCIA is there's a website called Make Mine Fine. So your logo will be there, and for people to see your story, you can send your messages to other people through that. So you can make your the same thing with CocoTown. We also have a feature called Share the Mic feature. So if you can send your story, we will share it on our social media. But I think here today people are very shy because I see only Erin put her information, other people are not even putting their information. So the one thing is, like, if you want to succeed in the business, first come out of it. Don't be shy. You have to talk about your business, because I was like that, okay? Because in India, we are taught to be humble and not talk about yourself. But when I came to US, it was completely different. They said, if you don't talk for yourself, somebody else will talk for you, and that may not be the right perception or the good perception. So it's we start talking about ourselves. So
That's
please,
so true. So true. You've got to talk about yourself and your business, and you've got to be willing to do it. As Andal said, if you don't do it, nobody else will. So I totally agree.
Something else that I had written down based on the conversation or based on the presentation was know your audience.
Yeah.
You talked about if you're a regional, if you're making regional flavors, that might be for your local market. And then you may do something different if you're going to export,
Yep.
so it's about sort of knowing your market, deciding which market you want to be in or focus on, and then, kind of base what you're going to do on that market.
That's a really good point. There was an Ecuadorian chocolate maker who had a rose bar, and like I literally couldn't give it away. They gave me little samples one time, and my customer's like, "No, I don't want it." But apparently, it was a huge seller for them in Texas. So, like, even within the United States, there's regional flavor differences that people love and don't love. So you're right. Know your audience and everything you're doing.
Yeah, Marilyn is asking about the bean to bar workshop. Marilyn, we are just waiting for the world to open up a little bit more, because still some countries have some restrictions, but we are hoping to have it by August. So let's keep our fingers crossed. So we will let you know as soon as we decide. That's our vision too, because like I said, when you are physically present, that has a different dynamics, different energy, and some of the things you cannot learn over the Zoom. Is we can learn the theory, but if we have to do the practical, it has to be done in person. Yeah, we are also anxiously waiting, just like you. Okay, so anybody else want to ask the question instead of typing in the chat? Feel free to raise your hand. We can open the mic, because I see some more questions coming up.
There we go.
I love that you talked about the 3 S's: sensory, story, and sustainability, and the idea of figuring out which one is the important one for you to focus on, and sort of prioritizing your 3 S's.
Right.
So
And then the chocolate passport. I love that.
Yeah, honestly, I probably should have focused. Well, I don't know. I could have focused more on that. I don't know. We focused a lot on that, but it's easy to sit back and wonder what you should have done differently. But that was one of the things I probably should have spent more time on, instead of trying to do so many events. Okay, Marilyn's looking forward to your class there, Andal.
Thank you, Marilyn. And Srinivas, do you want to ask the question, or you want to talk about your company? This is a good way to pitch. Raise your hand so we can open your mic. Okay. You get unmute. Srinivas, can you talk?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hey, Lauren, and so thanks for giving that opportunity. Yes, I'm based in California, Folsom, but we have some small single estate like a cocoa farm in India. So along with my farm, I have my friends who are actually very innovators, and they are very fascinated with agriculture, farming, and good practices, especially in the sustainability area. With that, with some inputs from the Cacao Town and other folks, I think they are implementing good practices in terms of cacao production and sustainability, and they are giving good quality. But they still need some assistance from chocolate makers based on that how they want their beans. Like sourcing is very, very important, right? So they need some assistance, and give them some confidence that if you do this way, we can buy certainly, because your beans are at the maybe, for example, so we are looking for some 1 to 10 range, right? We are looking at 9 or 7, but we are still at 5. Do this way, you can do by the time you do this way, then we can certainly consider buying all those things. So we have to give some consideration, like confidence. Other than that, yes, we can I would like to market their beans at a small quantity in the beginning, Later, if they reach certain level in the quality standards, then we can expand their that one, right? So on that line I'm coming from, so I'm sourcing from one farm. They are doing in a way that the best way what I'm thinking. So I'm trying to find some partners who can consider the beans for the production, for the bean to bar or whatever it is, practically works. It can be chocolate drinks or bars, whatever. My point is that there are questions around being able to, obtaining the necessary licenses to, the FDA or USDA thing. Those things are important for me, but in a way that, so for example, I have my beans ready, so just I'm trying to find some good chocolate makers who can take and provide valuable inputs, and even if it is okay, then we can continue working with me.
I was just gonna say something to that, Srinivas. Just one thing I would say is when you talk to different chocolate makers, they're probably going to give you different advice around what quality is. And so I would just say, I was even having a conversation with one the other week who consistently buys from the same farmer groups every year. And they said, yeah, another chocolate maker, one I know as well, that's, these are both decent sized craft chocolate makers, came in and gave the farmers different fermenting advice. And this craft chocolate maker who buys from them all the time was like, nope, please don't listen to that. Please do what we told you to do, because we've already, and then they would buy up all of their lots. So I guess I would say, when you're talking about the quality aspect, it helps to know who you're going to be working with, because they're each going to have their own approach to how they want things fermented and dried. So just one thing to think about.
This kind of brings up a good point of conversation for building community. Probably, or maybe the process, the ideas might be different if you're a farmer, if you're a maker, and if you're a retailer. I don't know, what are you able to give any points? If you are a farmer, what might you do to create a customer community, and really, who is your customer?
I think that is definitely a harder question, because it really depends on what chocolate makers you're working with. Some are, and so maybe it is trying to locate chocolate makers who develop long-term strong relationships with a specific origin. I was talking earlier about, if you, as a chocolate maker, I think it's better not to do too many origins, do a few and do them really well, and do them over and over again, because you're only going to get better at them. That also benefits the farmer, because the farmer knows they have this consistent outlet for their beans. But also, if, like I was saying earlier, if the maker is saying, I'd really like you to ferment this way, then the farmer knows, okay, I'm going to use their fermentation protocol or what they want, and then they're always going to buy beans from me. So you start to get some level of consistency. And it's funny, because I once said something about consistency, and if any of you know Colin Gasco, who used to be Rogue Chocolatier, he was like, I'm not going for consistency. And I said, okay, wait a minute. Let me back up and redefine what I mean by consistency is every time you send me a bar of chocolate, and this wasn't specific to him, he and I were just having this theoretical discussion. Every time you send me a bar of chocolate, it needs to be world-class, best quality. Doesn't have to taste the same. I get that every harvest is different, but it has to be the same quality. And that's not what's happening with a lot of craft chocolate makers. So I think, going back to developing this long-term relationship with the farmers is part of that, and being able to deliver that quality every time. And so I don't know if this really helps you, Srinivas, because I know as farmers, you kind of have to take what comes to you as for business. But I think being able to develop that community of craft chocolate makers that are committed to working with you for the long term is how you're going to succeed. Otherwise, you're constantly going to be changing things.
Yep. Some relations with some, at least few people, right? Not all.
Right.
I want to add one more to Srinivas' point. His beans, he sent it to Carla from Crew Chocolate, and she made a chocolate out of it, and we got the chocolate. It was a very good chocolate. So the one thing I want to let the chocolate makers to know is, even if the beans are not the best, you can change the roasting profile, and then when you're adding the sugar, you can manipulate and bring out the best of the chocolate flavors. So it's not going to be a waste unless it's like a very badly done, it's unfermented or something. But if the beans are not, doesn't have to be always the world-class beans, but you help the farmers in the beginning. That's one of the sustainability goal for most of the chocolate makers. So you can help them to make it better, but at the same time, from the beginning, you can make a good chocolate that you don't lose money by buying that product.
Well, and just to draw on what you're saying, I mean, it's the same thing, going back to what I was saying earlier. If you're working with those same farmers and they're producing reasonably the same every time, as to Andal's point, you kind of get your formula down then, and you may have to change it a little bit with every harvest, but like, you know what you're working with and they know what you're expecting. So even if it isn't, as Andal said, world-class beans, but you can still make a good product out of it, at least the fewer variables you're changing, the more you're going to be able to make a good product.
And then Vinette, do you want to ask your question? If so, please raise your hand. I see that you typed something in the chat.
Oh, can I recommend a product label maker for craft chocolate? If you're talking about, so it depends. Are you talking about packaging for a logo? Are you talking about ingredient labeling separately from that? Because that's what we were doing. We were not printing anything with ingredients on it. Are you talking about a printer or a company? It'd be helpful to have some clarity there.
Hi.
Yep.
Here's some.
Hi, Winnet. I'm talking about the packaging to put on the product itself, to put on the chocolate bar. So you package your bar, so you need to get a front label, and then you need to have something on the back that might speak to the ingredients or quantities or something like that. And if I am right now doing chocolates, well, I'm starting because we have our own farm. So we are now moving from using our beans to produce chocolates to be sold locally. And we're doing 60% and 70% dark chocolate. And the challenge is changing the labels, so, even if I order from a commercial, give me 100 of 60%, and I have to order another 100 of 70%. So when you said that you have a product that you can use at home that you make, I thought, well, could you recommend a product that I can buy and I can make my own labels at home? So if I want to change, today I'm going to do 50 bars labels for 60%. Tomorrow I can do 20 bars for white chocolate and vary it around.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways I can answer that question. Those are a really good question, Winnet. So I'm going to say a few different things, and hopefully by the end I'll have answered it. So we had a Zebra label printer so we did clear packaging. We had some of our own bars that we were doing as confectioners, right? And again, I didn't want to invest a lot of money in upfront packaging. And so we did some very nicely done front labels that we had printed thousands in advance, and that had the specific information on it. On the back for the ingredient label, we used a Zebra printer, and I can put the link in a little bit, that they're kind of standard. Like if you ship FedEx or UPS, oftentimes you'll have a Zebra printer, but they have different models and they do different things, but we were able to print ingredient labels for that. So we would put that on separately from the front label. If you're using a package, what I've seen a lot of chocolate makers do is you can get the packaging made with your logo and your basic information on it and an open spot where you could then print like what's actually in the package and like label it on there. So you could have like a beautiful, I'm going to use this because this is just what I have in front of me, like Good Enough Farms here. They've got this lovely envelope. You could leave this part blank and have a printer that does a nice label that says, okay, today this is the 60% bar with this in it. And you could put the ingredients on the back, right? So you could do any combination of just printing something on the fly on one of these Zebra printers, which are not pretty, they're functional. Like they're just going to give you a little white label that has the ingredients crammed in there. So they're functional. You can get what you need on there for the FDA, but they're not pretty. Or you could do something like a really nice envelope like this, where you leave a square blank and then have some kind of a nice printer, just any kind of nice color printer that has good ink in it, like where you're printing, the actual product label that you can then put on this package. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that gives me an idea, because right now I like the clear packaging. But the challenge for me is, even with the clear packaging, you still need to put something on it.
Yep.
Right. And the clear packaging, people can see the product, but then you want something a bit sturdy too, so that it doesn't break, you know, or get damaged. So you still want to put it in a little box or something like envelope or a box. So you actually ended up putting 2 sets of packaging, and that's costing you money and wasting. So it's either I take the chocolate and I wrap it in the foil and then put it in the box. And
Okay.
just as you showed there, to have that box printed, probably with a space in the front where I can have the variation, 70%, because some of the information I have is standard, the name of the company, the beans being used, you know, the process and so on. But I want to just vary whether it's 60% dark, 70%, or whether it's infused. You want to vary that. So I want to have that flexibility, and then the back with the ingredients. So I like the idea that you're just showing me there. Just give me an idea.
Yeah, and that
Because right
allows
now I
you to,
just wrap the chocolate in the
Right.
wrapper, and I make a home label.
well, and
But
that
I
gives
want
you
to
the
kind of
flex.
upscale from that. So,
Yeah, no, and it gives you the flexibility, but it also allows you to take like the part that's not changing and make it look pretty, right? Because if you're just printing
yeah.
everything off the Zebra, like I said, the Zebra printers, which I put a link, and they have many different solutions and printers. I'm not even sure which one these days would be the one you'd want, but those are going to be functional. They're not going to be pretty. So at least if you can do something pretty with the stuff that doesn't change, and then just
Yeah.
use this, or, you know, like I got a really nice Xerox phaser color printer that we used to use in the store to print price labels and print all of our graphics, like things we were doing for events. And yeah, the ink's expensive, but it's a lot cheaper than trying to do a print run for somebody else. So that's the kind of printer I would probably get to print the nice labels that you'd be putting on the front if you were doing something like I was saying before, where you leave this open.
Yeah.
I would get like a nice color printer. It's worth the investment because it does nice stuff and you're not sending stuff out to print all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'm glad that was another thing I had written on my my notes. I'm glad that came up about the wrapper, bringing it back to creating community. Being a lover of fine chocolate and buying and having a collection of chocolate, one of the things I love is the wrapper. The wrapper tells the story.
Yep.
I keep them as a piece of art. And I love that you said don't put the price. You said for a different reason, I think, don't put the price sticker on it. But for me as a collector of first the chocolate on the inside, but I keep the wrappers as a piece of art, and to try to rip that thing off, that sticker off, you know, you can mar that piece of art. And just if it's well received, I have a suggestion. As an artist, you know, artists will sign and number their prints. You could leave a blank space and do a handwritten. It's a 70% batch number. I mean, that
Well,
your chocolate is a piece of art, and if you hand write that information, it makes it even more special, I think. And then
if you have good handwriting and everyone can read it.
well,
That's
as an
important.
artist,
It's an
you can't
interesting
read my
idea, but
signature.
you got to make sure you can read it. The other thing I would say, just drawing on Teresa's point, is don't try to put everything on the wrapper. There's you know, like I said, you've got this incredible, everybody's got this incredible story around their chocolate, right? And a lot of them try to cram everything on the wrapper, understandably, because like, why is this so different than the $2 bar of chocolate over here from Hershey? And so it's trying to tell the story to the consumer who maybe is standing in a store that isn't Chocolopolis, where there's no one to help them. But the wrappers become overwhelming with information. So I think, to Teresa's point, a lot of people do save their wrappers. So trying to come up with something beautiful that visually gets your point across to some degree. And it's hard to do. Like, I think of Askinosie did that in terms of putting photographs of the different farmers on the bars. And that was great for what they were doing. I'm not suggesting that's what you do, but whatever your story is, they were able to get their story across with a graphic and some information, but they didn't overload the bar with tons of writing and data. So like, if you put too much writing and data on it, that's going to turn people off too. So it's finding that balance between writing and graphically telling your story on the wrapper without overwhelming the customer. And that's a lot to do in a small space.
As a collector of wrappers, I love what they do. You know, they tie that bar with a piece of the jute bag. They take it apart and it's tied with that little piece of the bag. So just a little, you know, like extra little something that I've never seen anybody else that does that.
No, that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
great use of a jute bag that would otherwise not have one once it got here.
And it differentiates their, if you're saving wrappers, makes it
Yeah.
makes it unique.
In fact, we have seen a wrapper from Venezuela because it's so hard to get all the things there. They came up with the laser cutting the paper in such a way it looks like an art, printed art.
Hmm.
There's nothing used. It's just a piece of cardboard. They cut it in such a way, and then when they fold it, it has a nice design. I wish I had that wrapper with me here.
Do you remember what brand it was?
I should know that.
You
Okay.
said Venezuela, Mrs. Balu, or because I'm thinking of Scrap and Chocolate in Peru, how she.
Yes, Scrap and Chocolate, she decorates it, but the Venezuela is the minimalistic one where they took the paper and then cut it with the laser cut with the different designs. I'm sorry.
So the positive and
over.
negative space make the design. That's great.
Yeah, what I can do is like, when we send the email, I can put that information with the picture for others to see. Sorry, guys, I use so much chocolate, I forget what it's for.
But you can see that how the wrapper works to help create brand community, customer community. People identify with your logo, your wrapper, even as simple as there is one, I think, from Venezuela that you brought, and it's wrapped in butcher paper, brown butcher paper with a sticker on it. I love it. And I'll save it just as much as I love the very ornate, the ornate wrappers. I mean, it's a great way to build your brand identity and your customer community with something as simple as your wrapper that you have to do anyway. So it's not something it's not an extra expense for building your customer community. You have to wrap it. So it's a nice way to work on building customer community awareness.
Well, and you're right, Teresa, sometimes less is more. It really depends on what your brand is and what you're trying to convey. And sometimes it is a beautiful wrapper and it doesn't have much on it, and that might be just fine for your brand.
Yeah, in fact, we have seen in Brazil, they use the cocoa leaves, the dried cocoa leaves as a packaging.
In Brussels?
Brazil.
Oh, Brazil. I was going to say that would be a long trip for those leaves. Okay, got it.
Because they cut so many leaves. So they use the leaves as a wrapper and also as a box for the truffles and bonbons.
That's
so
cool.
These, it's a sustainable packaging.
I just wanted to give voice. Someone put in the chat. I've seen the label thing done well and done sloppy. It does make a difference.
That's Ernie. He was in one of the photos early on in the slideshow. But yes, he's right. It's agreed. It can be done well. So I guess back to Wynette, if you are going to do some of the homemade part with a zebra printer or maybe a color printer, you definitely want to think about it being done well. As Ernie says, there's some great examples and some not so great examples, but I bet Wynette, if you have access to a store that has other makers, there's some who do things like that. I haven't seen it in a while because many of these makers started, like I think Goodnow Farms, Fruition, they used to do stuff like that. And then I think they all kind of ended up with their origins and they stopped doing it. But you may be able to find some wrappers where people are doing that in different ways to get some ideas.
Yeah, he says, make sure you put the label on straight. And the excellent point is the package is the first impression with your customer.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I heard it, one of our webinars, that customer eats with their eyes first.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Check the chat here, make sure we didn't miss any questions. We're getting near the top of the hour, so anybody who was feeling shy, come on forward.
Feel like that you're talking to your friends because this is a chocolate community. We are all your friends, so don't feel shy to talk.
I would just like to say there is no such thing as a stupid question. When people say that, I'm like, nope, there's no such thing as a stupid question. So even if you're feeling like you want to ask something but you're not sure about it, just ask.
Okay, good. Erin raised her hand.
Yep, I just promoted her.
Okay.
Hello, it's me again.
Erin.
I love these. Thank you for doing these sessions. As I am kind of navigating the chocolate arena, I am finding it tough to connect with people. So I've looked all of you up on LinkedIn. We don't have any mutual connections, so I can't actually connect with you on there. I gave my email, but
Oh, I can tell you a trick.
okay.
Or join a group we're in and it'll let you connect. So if we're all in the same group, it'll automatically let you connect. So I think the FCIA, the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, I think has a LinkedIn group. I'm
Okay.
assuming Cocoa Town has a LinkedIn group. Join one of those groups and then you'll be able to connect with us.
Okay, I did follow those, so we'll see. I'll go back in.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then specifically for the Seattle area, is there any, besides the Northwest Chocolate Show, are there any groups?
Well, the FCIA is hoping to do more regional things, but we don't right now. Barbie Van Horn and I do the Pacific Northwest Chocolate Society, which is just, it's the most casual, like non-organized. I mean, there's a little bit of organization. I just show up, it's fun. And people sit and talk chocolate. And right now we're doing virtual. The nice thing about virtual is we've had people from around the country and also around the world join sometimes. So that might be a fun way. But I'm just trying to think. Other than Northwest Chocolate Festival, join the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, then you'll be very connected to the community. But yeah, I would say like Pacific Northwest Chocolate Society. I'm trying to think, Ernie, if you think of anything, put it in chat. But going to Northwest Chocolate, there's going to be so many people from all over the world there that's a great way to connect. And there's lots of educational programs. So you can go sit in the educational programs, meet the speakers afterwards, get to know people. I mean, that's probably the best way in Seattle to start connecting with the community.
Okay. Yeah.
And it is happening I think it's October, late October, early November.
Okay,
I think early November.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank
Jeremy.
you for that.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I just want to interject really quick a question about, I know we weren't going to talk too much about social media, but if I'm a chocolate maker or, well, anyone, a retailer or a farmer, and I only have time to do manage one social media account, what would you say would be where the one place to start, to plant the seed? Is it LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook?
Yeah.
What would be important?
I would say Instagram. I am not the social media guru, but I would say you got to be on Instagram. And you've got a product that sometimes is very photogenic and other times is not. But you've got a community and you can build it. I think Instagram is the most important. And I don't know, Teresa, you do this for a living, so tell me if you disagree. I think for me, though, like for an event like this, LinkedIn was really important because we're talking to the industry. To me, Instagram is more for the consumers, which is what most of us care about. When it comes to industry stuff, though, I use LinkedIn more. So I would say to me, those are the two things. With Facebook, I find it challenging, honestly. I think the groups on Facebook are really interesting. So if you're not here we go, Erin, go join Well Tempered. It's the Facebook community that Lauren Hynek and Estelle Tracy run that like every chocolate maker is on. So you have to be in the industry to join it, but you can go tell them you want to join and explain who you are and follow the instructions. Well Tempered is the place on Facebook to be. So I found Facebook groups to be really interesting. Like I'm in a Greyhound group because I adopted a Greyhound. I'm in a swimming group because I swim. And those are interesting because it's a community. And we have a Chocolopolis group where I would really like to see more people. Like we have a whole bunch of people signed up for it, but like there's not a lot of conversation going on. I'm trying to get that going. But I have so many customers who will like travel to Paris and like share their, where they're going and what chocolate stores they visited, that kind of thing. But I think the groups in Facebook, I think are really powerful as a business. I found Facebook really challenging. Maybe you guys, Cocoa Town, have had a different experience, but for me, Instagram and LinkedIn have been the ones that have mattered more. I imagine TikTok. I won't download TikTok because I believe the Chinese government, I want the Chinese government knowing what I'm doing. So I admit I'm usually a pretty quick adapter of stuff, but I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing TikTok. They don't need my information, but I'm guessing TikTok is probably one of the big ones too.
I'm finding the Facebook algorithm has just gone wacky and is getting in the way.
Yeah.
So there's more interaction on Instagram. and, as a small company, small makers, even us as a small company, that's why I kind of asked where should the seed be planted and where should the energy go? LinkedIn has been coming up a lot lately. So that was kind of why I wondered, so for connecting with people in the industry, LinkedIn, but for connecting with your customers
Right.
and building a customer community, you would say Instagram.
Yeah, that's what I would say. And I am, let's see, who asked me the question? Jeremy, we used a company in Portland that stocked glassine stuff. Oh, glassine, no, they were doing compostable clear. But I can, maybe after this, I can come up with, it depends on what type, but when you say glassine, you have to be more specific, because like Revere has 1 or 2 sizes of the kind of compostable waxy, if that's what you mean by glassine. But there was other companies I was working with that had smaller minimums if you're thinking more like compostable or plastic. So paper glassine. Are you familiar with Revere? They only have 1 or 2 sizes in their stock. So they're here in Seattle, but they are one of the big confectionery distributors of confectionery packaging. Let me, they've got 2 different websites. So the one's a custom and one's not. So actually, let me go back. I'll give you the main website, and you guys can all, if you're talking about packaging or labeling, if you go to the left side of their website, it's their stock and packaging stuff. And I guess the right side's something else, but okay, I'm going to give you their website there. It's the Revere Group. Go check them out.
We're getting close to the top of the hour, so if anyone wants to put their email in the chat to communicate with each other, time is running out to do that.
Yeah, remember what Andal said about you got to talk about yourselves. Now's the time. Put your names and your websites in there. This is how you network. Toot your horns.
Okay, looks like everybody's ready.
Okay, people are putting their emails in. We do
Okay,
have
we've got Lynette. Oh, Jeremy, you've got a Kickstarter. We did a Kickstarter. That was like that. So Kickstarter, let me just say before we close, that is, if you do it right, not only do you raise money, it's an incredible marketing tool to get your brand out and build that community, because it builds your community beyond like where you are. It has so many benefits, but you have to do it right. You've got to have a plan. Like that's a whole nother topic, but I would say Kickstarter is an incredible marketing tool. Oh, now everybody. So Aaron's asking recommended chocolate tempering machines. Undal, you don't have tempering, right?
No, we don't.
So we had small ones, and then we were doing everything by hand, and eventually we just invested in the Selmy, which because every chocolate maker I know seems to want to sell me or have a Selmy, and it was incredible. But this was when the USDA guy came to like spend the 2 hours investigating our site, and with FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, you have to clean every piece of equipment after an allergen goes through. And we had just gotten this Selmy. I knew I could resell it, so I wasn't worried, but we'd just gotten this Selmy. It's like, it's little and Rover with the conveyor belt. And we've got peanut butter, coconut, and milk chocolate at different points going through it. And he looks at it, he's like, you're gonna have to clean that after every allergen goes through. And I'm like, that's it, we're done. I can't, this is crazy. You can't take that apart and clean it. Like, I mean, you can, but you don't want to. So anyway.
That's why I think, even if they buy the tempering machine, we recommend our customers, they need to learn hand tempering first, because like you said, the machine is only a piece of it, and the bean to bar chocolate, viscosity, everything changes. Even in the tempering machines, you need to change the settings. So, and for small chocolate makers, most of the time the hand tempering works good.
That's a really good reminder, Andal, because tempering machine is it's not a machine. It is, but it's you still have to temper test and make sure it's in temper. And we got to the point, this is why we had the Selmy, in addition to a tempering machine, we had giant bowls of they were hand tempering these giant bowls of chocolate, which is not efficient. But to Andal's point, no tempering machine is going to perfectly temper stuff every time. You have to understand tempering and know how to test it. to make sure it's in temper, even if you're using the machine. The machine just helps keep it so you can keep working with it once it's in temper. So you've got to learn hand tempering.
Even the chocolate process is same. You know, it's not like the machines are not like microwave, even microwave, right? Depending on the, you know, the power of the microwave, the size of the microwave, how much food you are heating, the settings change. That's one thing the chocolate makers have to understand, that you have to learn all the machines, how they work, and then how your ingredients work with that.
Now, and I see we're now getting, I'm going to put uncommon cacao. I don't know, this might be too big for you, but let me get their website. Okay, here we go. So for the cocoa bean, the cacao beans that Jay Hernandez is asking about, there you go. And then Wynette, that's really interesting. I've got a sous vide machine. I'm going to have to try this. You're tempering cocoa butter with a sous vide machine. That's actually a really interesting idea. I guess as long as it stays watertight, you're good.
Yeah, it does. It takes 24 hours with the sous vide. You put it in a watertight because you have to do like a bain-marie because you cover it over with the water.
Right.
And you set the sous vide at the temperature, I think it's 92 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. And you leave it there for 24 hours. And at the end, it turns off and you get the tempered cocoa butter. And I use no more than 1% based on the weight of the liquid chocolate that you're using.
Are you putting it like in a Ziploc bag or in a glass?
To keep it,
When it's in the sous vide?
From the sous vide, I spread it out on parchment paper. And then this is the cocoa butter.
But when it's in the sous vide, is it in like a plastic?
It's in a glass jar. Yeah, that's
glass
covered.
jar. Okay.
Yeah, that's covered. You can buy the sous vide packaging that they would use when you're doing normal cooking. But I don't buy that. I just have a normal mason jar with a heavy cover, and I put it in because it needs to be submerged in the water. And then I put it in the sous vide, set the temperature 24 hours. And once it's finished, the cocoa butter is kind of opaque looking.
Mm-hmm.
And you scrape it out. I put it on parchment paper, close it up, and put it then in a solid closed seal container in the fridge. And when I'm ready to use it, I just grate out a little bit, no more than 1% of your weight of the chocolate, the liquid that you're using. So I start off with like half of, percent. And then you do your tempering follow the same process as if you're hand tempering.
Okay.
So you mix and check your temperature, and then you test it at room temperature to see that after a couple of minutes, it's nice and glossy. If it doesn't, you put a little bit more again, but it's the grated cocoa butter. It's less messy than the traditional hand tempering that I learned, because I do this on my own, so it takes a little bit and you have to keep checking and so on. But I find using the tempered cocoa butter makes it easier to maintain the process. So.
Okay. And actually, let me put in one more link before we sign off. I actually haven't used this, but I hear from, if you get on Well Tempered, there's like threads about Easy Temper. Carrie, who's a member of the FCIA, sells Easy Temper, and I haven't used it, but it has to do with adding some cocoa butter and getting stuff into temper really quickly. And she has a machine, the Easy Temper, that allows you to do that. And I've heard great stories about it. So get on Well Tempered if you want reviews of the Easy Temper process.
Well, as we start to wrap up, I just want to let everybody know our next Empowering Chocolapreneurs webinar will be on June 11th, same day, same time. And that will be with Donna Wise from InExpress. And she's going to talk to us about shipping and logistics and things like that we know are sort of an Achilles heel when it comes to chocolate and getting it where it needs to go. So look for that on June 11th. And we will be sending out an email with the link of the recording and any information that has been promised. We will send that out in an email. When you get that email, there is a link to a survey, and we would really love it if you would just take a few minutes and do that survey. That will help us know if we're on the right track with what we're doing. You also get the opportunity to let us know what kind of topics you would like us to bring. So that helps us so that we can bring topics and information that you want to know about. And Mrs. Balu also mentioned our Share the Mic feature. We would love to tell your stories. If you send to our email your story, your contact information, so that we can connect people to you, and some pictures to support the story, we would love to help get the stories out of all of you. So, Mrs. Balu?
Yeah, I think I want to make sure nobody else has any time, questions. It's top of the hour, so let's we can thank you all for participating. Like without you, without the community, we cannot be here. So we thank you for your support for this and this webinar, and thank you, Lauren, for sharing all the information. And if you have any more questions, if you are shy today, you can send us an email. We will send it to Lauren and get the answers, and then it will be on our website under FAQ. And also we will send a link to you, the recorded webinar, and also the link to the answers to the questions. So feel free to ask the questions that you were shy to ask, or you didn't think of, and you said, oh, I should ask that question. Now it's not too late. You can still send the questions, and we'll be glad to do that. Like Teresa said, please, if you want anything else that you want to learn and any other topic, feel free to send it to us. We'll be happy, and thank you all for your time. And again, I want to finish it with the Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. I want all of you to be safe and healthy and have a good rest of the day, because you are in different time zones. And thank you all.
Thank you all. Thanks, Andal. Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you.
Bye.
And all of you, anything you need, please reach out to us.